What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Speaking Sessions podcast. I am your public speaking coach, Philip, here to help you with all things public speaking and communication. And we've got an amazing person on the podcast today. His name is Patrick Storey, and this guy has transformed completely. So if you're one of those people that thinks that they shouldn't do video content, that they're afraid of video content, you need to listen to this episode today, because we're going to go through Patrick's transformation over really just about a month and a half of him going from not doing videos or very seldom doing videos to being really comfortable with those videos. And so Patrick is the owner of Vigor Chiropractic, and he has a new podcast that he's coming out with called Becoming Vigorous, which, yes, we're going to get into that because that seems kind of bizarre how he was afraid of videos and now how he's going to do a podcast. But Patrick, welcome to the podcast. Tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me on. So like you said, I'm a mobile chiropractor here in the Greenville area. And like you said, I'm going to start having a new podcast series, some solo, episodes, but also other ones where I'm going to have people on, and more specific kind of called table talk, where we're going to sit and chat and give some people some traits and some tips on how to become vigorous. And vigorous itself means to be strong, healthy, and full of energy. So just different ways that they can, as a business owner or as an individual, how they can become vigorous. So that's kind of my idea behind it. And it's going to be really exciting. So look forward to that.
Nice. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it as well. I know we've talked about this. So I'm looking forward to getting on the podcast too, not just listening, but being a part of that and that journey and everything. But let's go back into your journey real quick and talk about this, because really this started about a month and a half ago, but I'm sure there's more backstory to this journey of you getting into videos and everything. So would love for you to open us up with what that looked like for you before you started doing videos, and then once you started doing them, and kind of where you're at now.
Yeah. So I always wanted, and I always knew that I should get on video. And it was just, I don't know, I guess it was not necessarily fear, but it was just like, what do I say? How do I say it? There was different things going through my head. And then you put out that challenge, the 30-day challenge to get on live for 2 minutes. And it was just like, you know what, let me try it, And so the first day, I didn't know what, I was just anxious. I didn't know it count. Like, that was my first time going live, like me, myself. Like, I've gone live before, but I've had the camera the other way, and I forgot that it had the countdown, the 3, 2, 1. And I was like, oh gosh, here we go. And then I didn't know what to say. So I was just like, rambling on. And I think maybe 4 or 5 days in, it became easier and easier. The countdown just kind of came on. I was like, oh, hey, here we go. And so it just got easier and easier. And now, like that, I've always wanted to do a podcast, and it just got me to think more of like, okay, I can do this. It's not that bad.
Okay, so let's go back to the beginning. So you mentioned, and I've been the same way, or I was when I did my first podcast. I was like, oh man, I want to do a podcast. Sat on literally this microphone for about a year after I'd purchased it and did nothing with it. And I finally went to an event and said, hey, how do I start a podcast? And the guy was like, just start. And I'm like, well, yeah, duh, but what do I do? And he ended up going into some detail with me about some things that I could do. But at the end of the day, I just had to take action on starting a podcast. And so with you, what was in your mind, and how long was this where you were like, man, I should start doing videos. I really need to start doing videos, before you actually started doing them?
Oh man, it's been probably years. I've always worked for someone else too. So I never really had to do it. But I still wanted to do it anyways. And I just never got the courage to do it until, I guess, the challenge really. And I had the ring light and everything. And I just got the mic, but like through the challenge, I was like, I'm gonna, get a mic because I want to do a podcast. Anyways, it was just like it's always been on my mind, and I always wanted to give people value other than being in person. If they're a patient, whatever. Like, I want to help people have actual things that they can relate to and like actually use. So that's why I wanted to, get on and do more video. The video too is just like always like I don't know. I'm sure everyone gets it, but they don't like seeing themselves. They don't like hearing themselves. So it was always that too. And so being on it and hearing myself more and more, I was just like, who cares,
Yeah. Yeah. We all think we're weird to ourselves or how we sound and even how we look. Oh man, I look weird. I sound weird. But after a while, yeah, you do get kind of numb to it. But those first times is really a difficult thing. And I don't want this to feel like I'm harping on this, but for me personally, it's hard to relate with people like that. I remember going through some of it, but I don't have these emotions right now. So I really want to be able to pull this out of you. So bear with me as I kind of like keep drilling in on you about this journey and everything. And so you said the first day, like 3, 2, 1. Oh my gosh, what am I gonna do? And when we were talking, I think if I remember, it was like day 6 or day 7. It was like right at a week that all of a sudden you went from like, man, I'm so nervous, I don't know what I'm gonna talk about, to now all of a sudden you're like, I'm just gonna get on and I'll figure it out as I go along. What do you feel was that just that difference from day 1 to, let's just call it day 7, like literally 1 week where you went from, oh crap, what am I going to do? Can I even talk for 2 minutes, to you were doing videos like 4 or 5 minutes long. So you were going well over the 2 minute timeline and you looked way more comfortable by the end of the 30 days. But within that 7 days, what was going on in your mind to just get on that video live and just start talking?
I mean, so I told my wife, when we were doing it, I was like, hey, every day I have to get on this. And yeah, by day 7, I think just the consistency of doing it, it became easier and easier. I mean, I don't know really emotion wise. It was just the anxiety went away the more I did it. And two, I didn't really care about what I was going to say. The first couple of times I was like, okay, what if it's just awkward silence and I'm just sitting there, like that's kind of what I was worried about. And then I just started, just talking about life and talking about, I don't know, sports and just stupid stuff, but it just became easier and easier. And it was like, okay, this is not that hard. And every now and then I'd get someone actually on the live, like commenting. So I got to kind of interact with them. And so it was just kind of like, and two, after a couple of weeks or a couple of days, I actually had people here locally give me encouragement, which was really nice. Like they were like, "Oh, I like your lives, whatever. It's cool to see." And I was just like, "Oh, like people are actually seeing this." And so it was just more and more encouraging, really. And so that's why too the podcast I think is going to be a great thing here coming soon. And so it's just exciting to see that people are actually engaging and actually liking what I have to say. So
Yeah. And that's so cool to see, because I know that's a nerve wracking thing when you get on a live video and you're like, all right, so I'm here live, but nobody's actually paying attention, or I'm just sitting here talking to literally myself. And it is a different feeling and a different aspect, because you're thinking that somebody's probably on the other side literally watching right now versus a pre-recorded video. You're not necessarily thinking about, you're talking to yourself because it's not necessarily a conversation because it's just pre-recorded. When you're on that live, it definitely is a different thing. But that's also really cool that people in person were like, "Oh, I love your live." And I've noticed that a lot of times that I'll have people, or maybe not a lot of times, but there's definitely been times where people are like, "Man, I really like your videos. Keep it up." And they keep encouraging me, but I never see them like, I never see them comment, I never see them share. Oh, heck, I don't even really see them on social media because they're not really posting, but they're there lurking in the background. And was that kind of the same thing for you, or are these people that were also kind of liking and commenting the live videos?
No, it was definitely people that weren't like liking it or interacting. It was just random people, and they're like, "Oh, hey, I saw your lives. I like them. Whatever." So yeah, it is kind of interesting that like that they don't actually interact with the actual post, but then in real life they are encouraging. It's like that's kind of weird, but
Yeah. Yeah, it is a weird aspect, but I mean, it's the same thing. I think you'll understand this being married and everything, but I know my wife all the time. I'm thinking she's not noticing things. And not that I'm like trying to sneak around and do something, but it's just, I can't even really think of an example right now, but it'll be something that maybe I should have done, or I could have like even said like, oh, I'm going to do this. And then in my mind, I'm like, okay, I need to put it off for whatever reason. And then she'll come back and be like, oh, I thought you were going to do that. Or let's just call like a diet. Like, hey, I'm going to go on a diet. Oh, I thought you were on a diet, even though like I said it passively, didn't really tell her like, hey, I'm going on a diet now. We're all going on a diet. I didn't make it like this big thing, but like she notices those things. Or if I do like small little things, like she won't say anything, but when the opportunity comes up, she'll end up saying something because like she notices these things or these different patterns that I do. And so I feel like just like in our marriage, it's almost the same thing, or it's a similar thing when it comes to online, that people notice those little things that we're doing, even if they don't ever like or comment or anything. And so it's definitely something that we need to keep in mind as we do these videos. And so for those of you that maybe you're just getting started with your video content, maybe you're concerned about what people think or whatever, just keep putting it out there. People are noticing, people are watching, even if you're not those popular people that get hundreds of thousands of likes and millions of views on videos or your post or whatever. People are watching, people are paying attention to you. And what I've noticed, and Patrick, I don't know if you've noticed this yet or not, but those people that aren't actually liking and commenting, they're the ones that actually are paying more attention to you than the ones that actually like and comment. Have you noticed that at all?
yeah, for sure. Like I had one of the coaches from the gym that I go to, like it's like, man, I love it. Like it's cool to see your lives, whatever. And so yeah, it's just interesting that people that you wouldn't think, and I like that. I have a bunch of people back home in Texas, but just locally, I've had people just reach out and when I see them in person, say something about it. So yeah, it's
Nice.
it's it's kind of funny for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah, definitely becoming a celebrity, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So I'm sure this wasn't in the first 7 days that that happened, but over like the 30 days. So the first seven, like you really got more comfortable behind the camera, going live on video. Over the 30 days, you had people watching you, saying stuff, even though they may not have liked or commented on social media, but they were recognizing you and telling you in person. Was there anything else that kind of happened over this 30 days that would be interesting for us to know about?
I mean, just like that, I guess getting the equipment for getting the podcast going, it just kind of encouraged me more like that. I've always wanted to, and like that, I listened to a bunch of podcasts. And so it's just kind of like the last straw that was kind of like, okay, it's time. Like, let's do this, And so my brother's in the audio industry. And so he kind of gave me some tips on what to look for the equipment and stuff. But yeah, it was just kind of like, okay, once I started doing it, the videos got easier and it was like, why am I not doing anything like content wise, you know, for the business? It's like, what, why not? Like, this is stupid. Like, why am I not, why was I so, I don't know, fearful or whatever of producing content? And now it's just kind of like, okay, like it's easy now.
Yeah.
Um, it's like the more and more that you do it. And so, like that, I want to give people value other than just, I don't know if you've seen chiropractic stuff on TikTok or Instagram or whatever. It's always just like the crack, like the ASMR videos where they just have them mic'd up and it's like you're not even giving them any value. You're just there for the sound, which I mean, sure, it's entertaining. People like to hear it, but I want to produce more than that, So I'm really excited about doing the podcast, whether I'm by myself, giving people value on not necessarily just chiropractic either, just how to deal with stress. And like I said, the becoming vigorous, how to stay strong, healthy, and full of energy. So that's kind of the three aspects that we're going to be covering throughout it, whether it's me by myself or live with someone with the table talk. So
Nice. And it's definitely coming along. I know Dusty and I were just talking right before we're recording this podcast, and he mentioned about your video the other day where I think you were at Greenville Networking Group where you were presenting and you were mic'd up and you had your phone propped up and you just took part of that actual presentation and put it on social media. And I'm sure you're going to put other parts on social media later, but that was like perfect right there where you're talking about your business a little bit, giving some value there and everything. And I agree that podcast is really going to be beneficial. And so let's dive into that now. So we went through this 30-day challenge. You're like, okay, I'm going to finally do this podcast. You bought all the equipment and now you have this idea for your podcast. So let's break that down, how you decided on this idea and then what steps you're taking to move forward on that podcast.
Yeah, so the idea was just to kind of tie it into the business too. And I wanted like that a way to provide people value. And so it just became like, and that I wanted to do a kind of almost like a personal brand kind of thing. And that way it also ties into, the business, but not necessarily always just talking about chiropractic, which is important, right? Everyone could use it. So the idea behind it though is just to like that, just provide people value.
So you just really want to provide people value with the podcast, which I think is really interesting because when you think about chiropractic care, or going really broad, and I know this is more of a wellness thing, but like medical care, like you think of these things and you're like, well, what kind of value can I technically provide? And like you mentioned with the crack videos where it's like literally somebody popping their back and you hear the sound of that, it's like, you're not really providing value. Although I would definitely think for you as well, that could be some good content too. Just like, oh man, look at this. Like this person came in, they didn't think anything was wrong. And, we were able to do this. And then maybe if you explain what some of those pops were, I'm sure maybe the louder the pop, of course, I'm ignorant here on this thing, but if the pop's louder, that means there was more tension or something, versus if it was quieter, maybe there's less. I don't know. But that's something you could probably explain in there as well. And as you bring these people in that are like, hey, I'm feeling pretty good, nothing's wrong with me. Well, hey, we did this, and this is still what kind of happened and what happened with your body, versus somebody who's like their neck's off to the side and they're like, yeah, I'm in a lot of pain. Like, well, clearly they need some help there. But you could explain those different things. But I like that you're going in with this podcast and doing that. And too often people, they don't think of a podcast as something that can be content generating. They think of it as like, oh, I'm just going to go in and interview people and that's going to be it. But this will provide business back to you because people will get to know, like, and trust you. They'll get to learn about you. They'll get to learn about your guest, but it's just providing them just value time and time again. And eventually they will do business with you. So even though it's not directly business related, it can still relate back to the business. And that's just a lot of what I do with my podcast. I bring people like you on. We talk about different topics that relate back to speaking that will then eventually or hopefully get them to want to do business with me as well. But but going back into the podcast a little bit. So tell us about this idea that you have, because maybe there's somebody listening that is local that'd be really interested in getting on and sharing some insight from them as they go through your podcast.
Yeah. So like I said, it's calling the specific episodes where I interview people is going to be called Table Talk. And if you've ever seen the show, The Shop on HBO with like LeBron James, and they basically like have a bunch of different celebrities and things like that come on, and they're like, some of them will get their haircut, but some of them are just there to chat. And they basically just shoot around and talk about different experiences and things like that. So that's kind of my idea, is to have different business owners and things in the area and get on and basically kind of go through some of the things maybe they've gone through and how they can become vigorous. How can you be more strong, healthy, full of energy? How did you go through stressful situations and then basically adjust them while we're talking? So that's kind of the idea behind it. So if you're in the area and want to get on, I'd love to have you on. And yeah, that's the idea behind it. It's gonna be a lot of fun. I think so, at least.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I agree. I like the idea. I think it's a great idea. It gets people literally into what you do as a service. And so they get that experience. And then you're having them on to talk about the thing that they love most themselves, talking about themselves. So it's just kind of a win-win situation there. And then a win for you as well, because you get to have a cool conversation with somebody. You get to create content for your audience and everything like that. So I think it's all around win when it comes to that, and which is just great. And so that's the guest episode, the one where you're recording with somebody. But when it comes to the solo episode, what are you doing there?
So just similar, just providing people different ways to deal with stress, whether that's at home, whether that's at work. Like I put up a video the other day about your environment and if you're working from home or at work, like having a clean space, and just little tips, things that people can use and can relate to that. We just got done moving and being in a new place, like, and not being so cooped up in the apartment and not hearing anyone is just it's so much nicer, like just in my mindset of like it's a lot clearer. I can think more. And so just different things that you can do like at home like that, if you just need to go in and clean up your space, or just little tips to make your life easier.
I like that. And going back real quick, I know with the live videos, I made the joke with you, and then that kind of stuck with a lot of other people, and using your last name, the Story Corner. And now you're talking about table talk. I think that's awesome. Something else I thought about with that is like the story table. I don't know if that is not quite as catchy as table talk, but still, just something I thought playing on your last name there. Like, so
Yeah, I'll still have some of the little videos in the story corner, because we still have it. We have like a little egg chair, and
nice.
so it's still like in the corner. So
yeah,
we're still gonna have some story corners.
yeah. And I think even like for behind the scenes for you or something like that, like you can be in your van, because for those that maybe it wasn't that apparent, that Patrick actually has a mobile chiropractic practice. So he actually has a van with a table in it. So he comes to your office and everything for that. So this is where this whole table thing comes in here. But I think it'd be kind of cool, like behind the scenes, and that could be maybe like the story table. So you have the table talk for the guest episode, and then the story table, if you will, for whenever you're actually talking just yourself. Maybe I don't know, just kind of throwing some ideas out there. But that kind of puts us into this new segment that I'm trying out with different guests, where we actually talk about like different ways you can use your story, use your message in order to create like better video content, or kind of helping you out from a public speaking perspective. So I really want to dive into that. So maybe I'll open this up first to you. Like, what thoughts have you been thinking about? And then maybe I can kind of plug in and help you out with figuring out things that may work well for you to help you. And then I'm going to give some my thoughts as well that could help you perhaps with getting your message out there to more people from a social media perspective, but even like in-person perspective. So it's like, yeah, I'll kind of open up to you. What have you been working on to kind of get yourself out in the world, so to speak, to get your business out there in front of people?
You're talking about like the podcast part?
Yeah, podcasts, videos, whatever it may be. So I don't know if there's anything else besides what we've been talking about.
So obviously, I've met you through networking, so I do a lot of that. But the podcast, I just posted on my Facebook and just asked people if they wanted to be a part of it, and all of a sudden I got like 30 people interested. So like that, I want to be able to interview them and just kind of see what they've been through business wise, and giving them an adjustment so that they can, if they've never had it or if they've experienced it but haven't had it from me. So being able to basically is just giving them some treatment and giving them some tips, or even not necessarily me giving them tips, but when I'm interviewing them, they can kind of give other people when they're watching the tips of how they got through certain situations.
Yeah, and I do like that concept. Like I know we've kind of talked about that a little bit. I do like that concept, and I'm wondering if there are any kind of questions maybe that you can ask them in particular. I know it's gonna be different for every guest, but is there like some particular questions that maybe you could ask that maybe could lead back to helping your audience as well as helping them understand a little bit more about the chiropractic practice, or any like these wellness practices that you would kind of implement to help them be able to gain more curiosity of your business?
Yeah, so I was gonna just kind of ask them like how, when they do come up with a stressful situation, like how do they typically kind of take care of themselves? And then that way it could kind of lead into, okay, well, if you have some kind of tension built up in your muscle or whatever, some people think of like massage, or so that just kind of leads into, okay, you can obviously, with your structural things that are going on, it can help as well. So you can kind of do the two things, or not just chiropractic, right? You can kind of use massage, use chiropractic, use physical therapy, use whether you go to the gym. Like, how do you deal with a stressful situation, basically?
Mhm. Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And then when we think about like partners that you could partner with, like a good referral partner for you, I think that could be something that you could do as far as bringing those kind of guests on. So somebody that does massages, somebody that owns a gym, perhaps things of that nature would probably be good for you as well. Is that something you've thought about going into or anything?
Yeah, I already have the coach at the gym that I go to. He's already lined up to get on my podcast, and then like that. Yeah, I need some other personal trainers in the area. I know a couple of them. So yeah, definitely kind of giving them a spotlight too of like, okay, how do they obviously deal with people coming in for the first time, kind of similar to your video challenge. Like, how do they address like someone new coming in, where it might be like that, just kind of anxious, the person might feel that, and so how do they make them feel comfortable being in that situation, being a newbie? And so
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. So I think that'd be great. So it sounds like you're already kind of on the path to do that. Definitely, I have a couple of people that come to mind. I'll have to connect you with them. That would be good referral partners there for you that you could bring on the podcast, or just even just have I guess a normal conversation, so to speak. Maybe not on the table there, but just have a conversation in general about that. And then when I think about like content more in person, so this would be good for you, like kind of any kind of seminar, so to speak, or some kind of lunch and learn. I think taking those same referral partners and hosting some kind of event, it could be for like an hour or 2 hours. It doesn't have to be anything crazy long. Could be something that'd be really beneficial as well. And then really targeting people that are really focused on that wellness and everything. I think that could be something that'd be really helpful for you that'll give you content as well, but it'll also give you that exposure in person. Because my belief is when you build up your local network, when you build up your local presence, it really ends up helping out with your more global or national presence, because you got to have that fan base somewhere, if you will, before you can go further out. So I think doing something like that would be helpful. So when it comes to things like that, I mean, who could you see yourself kind of partnering with to do any kind of talks where you're doing those talks in person?
Yeah, like I've thought about like that, doing obviously a gym would be great, but I've thought about like even going to like I know realtors get together like once a month. They usually have meetings where they all kind of get together. So different companies that like that can either have multiple employees. So there's a moving company here that I've, gone and treated their employees and just providing them like people when they have a job environment like that, a culture, and the employer wants to kind of give back to their employees, like they want to stay there. The last time I went and they were like, oh, when are you going to be back? So just different companies that like that have monthly meetings maybe, or where they all kind of meet together, or like that, and just like that, a lunch and learn with a different kind of medical office, so like a dental office, things like that, a mobile. So it's the people that can't necessarily leave the office, so providing them like treatment.
Yeah, I think that those are also great places for you to try and get partnered with and everything. But I think even like if you got in with if somebody that does like physical therapy or something like that, and y'all did like a wellness seminar, if you will, together, I think would be a great way for you both to be able to bring in your own audiences. So now you're kind of cross collaborating there, or you're collaborating and you're crossing the audiences as well. So they're both kind of similar backgrounds, but they know one person or the other, but you can do those lunch and learns to help bring them in so they get to know each of you as well. And you don't necessarily always have to give that free alignment or that free adjustment or anything like that. It could just be giving that information. So I think that's a great way for you to be able to get your name out there, and which really goes into that public speaking. And so now I want to kind of shift here a little bit, going back a little bit to what we talked about at the beginning, because you've clearly had this huge transformation, like you mentioned about being scared to death. You finally just doing the videos, and now you're starting at the podcast. You're already talking about ways that you can get in front of people and do these things. What would you tell the person that was maybe in your shoes, that was procrastinating and didn't really want to take that step into their speaking journey? What is some advice that you'd give them?
I mean, really just do it. I know it sounds like, oh yeah, sure, everyone just says do it, but I mean, the more that you just consistently are doing it, the easier it gets. Yeah, it's anxious. I was anxious, but the more and more I did it, the easier it became. And two, like who's really, I mean, yeah, people are watching, but who really, I mean, who cares? We're not in high school anymore, right? Gary Vee always says it. It's like, we're not in high school anymore. Who cares? Just do it. Do it for, like, if you want to do it, do something that you're passionate about, or that you want to do, and who cares what other people think. So I know it's easier said than done, but just stop thinking that people are out to make fun of you or whatever. It's like, people probably aren't even really, if anything, they're not even really listening, or if they are, so what, and it's helped me just confidence wise too. And just like that, just consistently doing it has made me more confident in person too. Like when I'm at these networking events and things, just talking there, I feel more comfortable, which is actually kind of, I was going to tell you that the other day. It was like, it's so weird, like getting on video on a platform where you don't see anyone, right? That I was fine in person, but being on camera where you see yourself and hear yourself, it was mind boggling to me. I was like, what? And then so getting on and being consistent became easier, and more, I was more confident speaking. And so now in person, I feel even more comfortable. So it's just interesting that doing videos can help your confidence elsewhere.
Yeah. And I'm glad you mentioned that, especially the just do it thing. I know that's the hardest thing to hear. And it's like, really, I want some actual tangible advice. But at the end of the day, if you don't do something, if you don't take some kind of action, how do you know what you need to work on? And so what I would add to that. And that's something I've had to learn to think about to be able to say that, because when I was told about doing my first podcast, just do it. And then, okay, here's a couple things you can do. And while they were helpful, at the end of the day, it still came down to I had to take action. And when you do take that action, then you can learn like, hey, here's what I didn't do so well. Here's what I can do better. Or here's what I really liked. Here's what I didn't like. But you don't know any of that until you start taking that action. And yeah, Patrick, I've noticed that in you, just to kind of give you that recognition there, that you have gotten more confident in person. You've gotten more confident on video as well. And that's really cool. I appreciate you bringing out that insight that you doing that video helped you with your confidence in person. And I had never really thought about how that could possibly help. I mean, I guess I tell people to do that because just inherently you talking more and more is going to make you more confident. But it is interesting because I know you've had opportunities and you do out here network. So you are talking in person, where some of my clients, I don't really know them personally as far as like in person. I do know them from social media, but I don't know their background outside of social media and the conversations that we've had. But I've seen you talking in person. So it's interesting to see that you doing videos ended up helping you in person as well. Although I have noticed the transformation there. So that's really cool. And so for those of you in the audience that you're afraid, you're a little scared, start with that video. Because like Patrick said, yeah, it's kind of weird. You're looking at yourself in this camera and you can see yourself, you can hear yourself. Nobody's responding back. And so even if they do or don't comment on social media, and especially if they comment something negative, that's somebody you don't want in the first place. But most people are going to be encouraging, especially when you're starting out, unless if you're being super arrogant, then you got a whole nother situation there. But we won't get into that portion of that. But yeah, it's really cool to see just how you've transformed over really the last like 45 days, which has been really cool. So, but Patrick, let's get on to our last segment here. And that is, if you could only share one message for the rest of your life, what would that message be?
Just recently, just with everything that we've been through, like going through the move, and I just right now is just gratitude is the biggest flex. So I love being grateful for not just thankful, but truly grateful. There's just so much value to that. And so yeah, just be grateful. There are people there elsewhere that wish they were in your shoes. So yeah, be grateful.
Gratitude is the biggest flex. I like that. That's pretty catchy there. But yeah, definitely we have to have gratitude and everything. And I'm very grateful that you came on the podcast to share your journey. I think it's really cool. And this is something you'll be able to go back and look upon here in 1, 2, 3 years from now and be like, wow, I had that transformation like that, but man, how much further I've came along. So it's going to be really cool to continue to watch you. But if people want to watch your journey, if they want to get to know more about you, Patrick, where's the best place for them to reach out and follow you?
So any of my social media is under my name, Patrick A. Storey. Storey is spelled Storey, which I'm sure you'll have in the notes there. But yeah, Patrick A. Storey, and then my chiropractic is Vigor Chiro, Vigor Chiro, Chiro. So any of those platforms, I'm on all of them. That's me.
All right, great. Well, Patrick, thank you again for coming on the podcast. This has been awesome, and we can't wait to see your journey more. And for those of you that are thinking about doing something, thinking about starting to speak, just go speak now, because your message matters.